Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive on something that I'm sure is a big deal for you guys. Those rising costs that are hitting small businesses everywhere. We see it in the news all the time, but today we're really digging into it. We've got a whole stack of articles here, and they paint a pretty intense picture, to say the least. We're talking about a real surge in expenses all across the board, and it's impacting businesses from Australia to North America, all the way over to the UK. And get this. One of these articles mentioned a figure that's pretty alarming. 30% of small businesses in one particular region are actually on the verge of shutting down completely. Yikes. We'll get into which region that is later on, but it just goes to show how widespread this problem really is. So let's roll up our sleeves and dissect what these four, I guess you could call them horsemen of the apocalypse. Well, these four cost categories really mean for the average small business owner. Imagine this. You've poured your heart and soul into opening up your dream business. You've got the perfect location, amazing products, and you're truly passionate about it. But then those bills start piling up. Rent, utilities, wages, the cost of materials. It's enough to give anyone a major headache.
You're absolutely right. And the thing is, this isn't just happening in one corner of the world. This is a global issue that's affecting small businesses everywhere. Take rent, for instance. The articles we've been looking at highlight how fiercely competitive urban areas have become. It's a real pressure cooker for businesses trying to make it. I mean, you look at cities like Sydney and Melbourne in Australia, and the rent increases there are just through the roof. It's not even about just finding a space anymore. It's about actually being able to afford to stay there once you do.
It's like trying to keep up with a monster that just keeps growing and growing,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you add in utilities on top of that, which is another huge pain point. Energy price hikes, especially, are hitting businesses globally. And it's not just because of one specific event. Remember the energy crisis that hit the UK recently? Businesses over there were slapped with a whopping 25% increase in their energy bills in just a single year. That's a massive jump.
25% in 1 year. Wow, I can't even imagine trying to budget for that.
Yeah, it was a tough blow for sure. And then on top of all that, we've got to consider the human side of things too. Wages and labor costs. Minimum wage increases are obviously intended to support workers, and rightfully so, but for small businesses that are already grappling with all these rising costs, it can feel like they're walking a tightrope trying to keep everything balanced. Like take California, for example. They recently raised their minimum wage to $15.50 an hour, which is great news for employees, but it adds another layer of financial pressure on businesses that are already dealing with those high operating costs that are so common in places like California.
Yeah, it's that constant struggle, right?
Yeah.
Trying to keep your business afloat while also making sure your employees are taken care of. It's a tough balancing act for sure.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about those supply chain issues. Remember all those disruptions we kept hearing about during the pandemic? Well, they haven't magically disappeared, unfortunately. In fact, for businesses over in the UK, Brexit actually made things even worse. The new regulations and trade barriers added a whole other layer of complexity, leading to even more delays and increased costs. It's been rough. On average, the cost of materials has gone up significantly across the board, and this puts immense pressure on businesses. They're basically forced to either absorb those extra costs themselves, or they have to pass them on to their customers, which is never an easy decision to make.
So we've talked about all these rising costs hitting small businesses from every angle. But it's not just about the numbers, is it? What does this actually mean for the people behind these businesses, like the owners, the employees, and even the communities they're a part of?
You're right, it goes way beyond just the numbers. One of the articles we came across mentioned this survey done by Zero. They're a cloud-based accounting software company, by the way, that a lot of small businesses use. Anyway, this survey found that nearly half of all small businesses in Australia have actually seen their profit margins shrinking.
Yeah, and shrinking profits have this ripple effect, don't they?
They really do.
It's not just about having less money in your account at the end of the month.
Right.
Shrinking profits mean that businesses have less money to invest in their future, to grow, to hire more people, or even just to deal with unexpected problems.
Exactly. They have less cushion to fall back on.
It's like trying to run a marathon with your shoelaces tied together.
I like that analogy. And it's in situations like that where that scary statistic you mentioned earlier comes into play. Remember that figure, about 30% of businesses facing the risk of shutting down?
Yeah.
Well, that's happening over in the UK right now. They've been hit by this perfect storm of Brexit, skyrocketing energy prices, and just overall inflation, which has created a really, really tough situation for businesses over there. In North America, we're seeing things play out a bit differently. Over there, it's more common for businesses to consider cutbacks. Things like reducing staff, maybe shortening their operating hours, or putting off investments that would help them grow.
Wow, that's That's pretty bleak. So it sounds like this cost crisis is really pushing businesses to their breaking point, and the consequences are felt way beyond just the balance sheet.
I'd say so. We can't forget that small businesses are the backbone of most economies. They create jobs, they drive innovation, and they really do breathe life into our communities. So if they start disappearing at a large scale, the impact is going to be massive, and not just economically, but socially as well. Think about it. Your favorite little bookstore closing its doors, that family-run restaurant around the corner shutting down because they just can't make ends meet.
Right.
It changes the entire feel of a community.
It's a domino effect.
Absolutely.
And on top of that, let's not forget about the human cost, the jobs that are lost, the dreams that are put on hold, the families that are impacted by all of this.
Yeah, it's tough all around.
It's a lot to process, to say the least. But amidst all of this, well, I shouldn't say doom and gloom, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Our research did actually uncover some glimmers of hope because businesses are incredibly resilient, and we found that they're coming up with new ways to adapt and navigate this challenging landscape.
That's right. Businesses are known for their ability to innovate. And this current crisis is pushing them to really think outside the box and find new creative solutions. In fact, the articles we have here highlight 5 key strategies that businesses are using right now to try to weather this storm.
Well, let's dive into those strategies a bit. The first one, and maybe the most obvious one, is passing on those increased costs to customers by raising prices. But I imagine that's a delicate balancing act in itself, right?
It definitely is. Businesses need to stay competitive, and if one business raises prices while their competitor down the street keeps theirs the same, they risk losing customers. It's a tough call, and it requires a really deep understanding of both the market and their customer base. Some businesses might have a bit more flexibility than others, depending on what they're selling, their brand loyalty, and how much competition they're facing.
Right. It's not as simple as just adding a percentage increase to everything and hoping for the best.
Not at all.
So, what about energy efficiency? It seems like that's a strategy with long-term benefits, even if the upfront costs can be a little scary for some businesses.
Oh, for sure. Investing in things like energy-efficient equipment, looking into renewable energy options like solar power, these are smart moves in the long run. And the great thing is that in some regions, like Australia, there are government incentives to help businesses make that switch to renewable energy more affordable. In fact, one article gave this great example of a small bakery in Adelaide that installed solar panels on their roof.
Okay.
And they saw a huge reduction in their energy bills within the first year.
Yeah.
And because of that, they were able to reinvest those savings back into their business, which actually allowed them to expand their product line and even hire more staff.
That's amazing. That's a perfect example of how a long-term strategy can have those real, tangible benefits. But what about the more immediate challenges? Like, are there ways to optimize supply chains, for instance, to try to lessen the blow of those rising material costs?
There are, but it takes a strategic approach. Businesses are having to get creative. Some are exploring local sourcing options to cut down on transportation costs and those long lead times. Others are actually teaming up to buy in bulk so they can get better deals. And then there's the growing use of technology and automation to streamline their processes and become more efficient overall. It's really all about finding that sweet spot between cost, quality, and reliability, which is definitely easier said than done.
It really does seem like finding that balance is the key takeaway here.
I think so.
It's not just about cutting costs, it's about making those smart strategic decisions that help businesses thrive even when times are tough.
Absolutely. And sometimes those tough decisions mean taking a closer look at labor costs. And before anyone panics, I'm not suggesting slashing wages or anything like that. It's more about thinking differently, like, could some employees work remotely to save on overhead costs? Could some tasks be automated to boost efficiency? Those kinds of things.
It's about finding ways to work smarter, not harder, right?
Exactly. And then there's always the option of government relief programs. A lot of countries have rolled out things like grants, loans, or tax breaks specifically designed to help small businesses weather these storms.
Yeah, those programs can be a real lifeline for sure, but they're not a permanent solution, are they?
That's the thing. They're a temporary fix,
Yeah.
like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone. It helps in the short term, but it doesn't address the root of the problem.
Yeah, you can't just keep putting Band-Aids on a broken bone forever.
Exactly. And this situation really highlights a bigger issue. Finding a long-term balance between making sure workers are supported and paid fairly, creating a healthy environment for businesses to grow, and keeping goods and services affordable for everyone. It's a complex puzzle, that's for sure, and there's no magic solution.
It really does feel like we're at a turning point. The decisions that are made today will have a ripple effect for years to come. And if we don't figure out how to deal with these rising costs and build a more supportive environment for small businesses, well, we risk losing a vital part of our communities and our economies, don't we?
And the consequences of doing nothing are pretty concerning. I mean, we're potentially talking about higher unemployment rates, less competition, less innovation.
Right, that's the domino effect again.
It is. And it just shows how important it is to find solutions, support our local businesses, and advocate for policies that create a more sustainable and equitable economy for everyone.
So, as we wrap up here, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
I think the most important thing is to stay informed about what's happening, engage in conversations like this one, and find ways to support those businesses that make our communities unique and vibrant. Things like shopping at your local stores, eating at those family-owned restaurants, making conscious choices that contribute to a stronger local economy. Every little bit makes a difference.
Couldn't agree more. And hey, maybe this challenging situation will actually spark the kind of innovation and collaboration we need to build a brighter, more sustainable future for all of us.
It's like they say, necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Absolutely. So until next time, keep those questions coming, keep exploring, and keep diving deep into the topics that matter most.